All right, so good evening, everybody. I'm Elena Wiesel. I'm the Director of Development at AACI, and I'm very pleased to introduce Rabbi Zev Shandalov, who will be facilitating tonight's program. Enjoy.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Elena. Full disclosure, Elena and I are also neighbors, friends, and I was very happy to be able to meet with you this evening. Bezrat Hashem, we'll have some time together. Just want to tell you what we're going to do. I'll be spending majority of the time talking on the topic of Yerushalayim. Tomorrow night, as you know, is Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. It's the darkest time of the Jewish calendar. Maybe this year we'll get lucky. Bezrat Hashem, it's not a matter of luck, it's a matter of what we do, but maybe we'll have a change and we won't have to worry about Tisha B'Av. Well, we don't have to worry about it because it's on Shabbat, but we won't have to worry about the 10th of Av this year. So majority of the time I'll be speaking on that. And the last few minutes I want to, for those of you who are unaware, introduce a book that I recently published, read one brief story from the book, and tell you a little bit about it. So I'd like to get started. Okay, so tonight's topic is If I Forget Thee, O Jerusalem. It's an English phrase that is actually just a quote from the Pasuk, If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its cunning. So I want to look at a couple of things. And by the way, I'm going to have a couple slides there in Hebrew. And if you don't have the Hebrew, it's fine. I'm going to translate everything. I want to start with a question. The Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit tells us as follows. I see this got a little messed up. Okay, that's fine. Whoever does work on Tisha B'Av, siman bracha. Again, I see it got a little messed up. It's fine. The person also who is not mitabela Yerushalayim, person who doesn't mourn for Yerushalayim, also that's a big problem for them as well. The main point I want to get to is over here. The Gemara tells us, Kol hamitabel Yerushalayim, whoever mourns for Jerusalem, will have the zechut, have the merit to see its joy, meaning evidently with the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding. Now, the way I translated that is not correct, because look at the words. If you even know a little bit of grammar, you'll notice it says, whoever mourns for Jerusalem, it doesn't say yizkeh. It doesn't say in the future he will merit. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can all see it a little bit better. Look over here. Look at these words right there. Zoche vero'eh besimchata. He merits in present tense and sees its joy. That's kind of like, what does that even mean? Why? How can we say that kind of a statement in the Gemara? So that's the question I want to deal with for a moment. And I'm going to answer it the following way. In a strange, maybe an unusual place. When Yosef's brothers threw him into a pit and they wanted to make their father Yaakov think that he was dead, what did they do? We know that they took this coat of many colors and they made a Broadway play out of it called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But besides that, what they did was they dipped it in blood and they brought it to their father. And he said, Ach tarof toraf, my son has been torn apart. He must be dead. And then it says the following, Vayakumu kol banav, all of his sons and daughters tried to comfort him. He refused. He was unable to be consoled. Now, on the one hand, you could just say that the pain, the suffering, the horrible idea of losing his son was just there was no comfort. But vayima'en doesn't mean he was inconsolable. It means he refused to be. So what does that mean? So Rashi tells us, "En adam mekabel tanchumim." A person is not able to be comforted in a situation. I see again, I'm sorry, this got a little mixed up. I'll read it to you from my own knowledge. A person is not able to be comforted when in fact the person is alive, and he thinks that he's actually dead. What does that mean? Because only on a person who actually died is there exeirah from Hashem that you can eventually get past and move to a point where you can be consoled. Let me explain to you in normal English what Rashi's saying. First, I'll take it off screen share for a moment. The way Hashem created us is that when a person loses a relative, whether it's a tragedy or it is through the natural course of life, at some point, the initial terrible feeling starts to change. In some cases, it never goes away, but it doesn't remain that strong, that moment of the death forever. We are blessed with the power of forgetfulness, or forgetting, not forgetfulness. However, if somebody is told that so-and-so has died, but there's somewhere deep, deep down, they believe that that person still might be alive, that idea of the person forgetting, of that person not remembering, a person getting past this will not kick in. Meaning, deep down, there was still this feeling that Yaakov believed that his son had to still be alive. I can't be consoled. Why can't I be consoled? Impossible. He is alive. He must be. What does this have to do with the question? Question was, why does the Gemara tell us that when a person mourns for Jerusalem, he's zocheh in present tense, he merits seeing Jerusalem's joy? Because if we believe that the Jerusalem of old, the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, and the city is dead, so to speak, that the city is, 1 second.
You open them now before you leave, please.
We have to just ask everyone, please, to make sure your phone's on mute or your computer's on mute. That the person will not accept the fact that the Jerusalem old, the temple, is not there. It is never going to be there. We can already see it in our own mind's eye. We can feel it when it becomes a part of our lives. It's not that we will see it in the future and that we will have the zechut to see it in its joy, that we can already see it. It's a part of our life. It's a part of who we are. And we feel that sense of presence. And that's what it means when it says, in present tense, to see its actual joy. We also, though, in the meantime, that's on the one hand, that we have Jerusalem is in the forefront of our minds. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we even talk about the Jerusalem being in the forefront of our minds, we have to understand that there are many things that we do. I just popped 2 here on the screen that we do that are to remind us that we unfortunately don't have a good situation right now in Yerushalayim, on Temple Mount, on Har HaBayit. It says when a person is making a new home, that they paint their home, they construct it, they do everything. That a person, it's very common to leave a square empty near a person's front door. It's called in English, in Hebrew, zecher lechurban, a remembrance of the churban. And the other thing that I'm sure many of you are aware of, that we break a glass or something at a chuppah. We also know that in many cases, there's the second line here, that a chatan is standing under the chuppah, has some have the custom to put a little ashes on the forehead, or actually not forehead, that's a different religion, but ashes on the head where the tefillin goes. These are symbols or signs that we keep Yerushalayim in this moment, in this place, that it is not something that some ancient city, some ancient building, but it's part of who we are every day. There's a story that Rabbi Pesach Kron Shlita tells. Now, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's besides being a mohel who travels around the world doing britot, he's a magid. A magid is a storyteller, but it's not just he tells stories. He has stories that are true, stories that have a point, and he personally or his staff verifies every single story. I heard a story from him a number of years ago that took place in Baltimore, the United States. And evidently some Jewish guy hired a painter to paint his house. And when it came time to paint the door, I'm looking like towards my front door, came time to paint the area around the front door, he told him to leave a square unpainted. This is a Greek painter. This is how he tells the story. He's a Greek painter, not Jewish. And the guy asked him, why? He started explaining, he says, look, we had a temple. It was for many years, it was destroyed. And as a reminder, we leave a space in our home unfinished just to remind us that something's missing in our lives. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that. How long ago was that? I didn't read about it. I didn't see about it in the news. He says, well, it was about 2,000 years ago. The painter said, 2,000 years ago? Get over it already. Those are the words the painter used to this homeowner. And the truth is, we don't get over it. Now, most people don't walk around day in and day out. It wouldn't be normal To walk around day in and day out, go, oy vey, we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Oy vey, look at Yerushalayim. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash. Most people don't, but to some degree, whether it's in our tefillah, which we'll talk about shortly, or it's in some other aspect of what we do in our various customs, Yerushalayim is front and center in our lives. If that's the case, this is the question I want to ask. Why is there all this emphasis on Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash? Why? Why is it so critically important? What is it that when we mourn on Tisha B'Av, what is it we're mourning? Now, so let's do a little bit of a background first. What is the source of the uniqueness of Yerushalayim? Why is it that Yerushalayim is the only city that's mentioned in our tefillot? What's the source of its holiness, the origin? Why can't Hashem's Beit HaMikdash be built in Toledo, Ohio? I don't know why I picked Toledo. Okay, so let's do it in Israel. Do it somewhere in the Galil. You want to do it somewhere further down south, do it outside of Tel Aviv. Why is it so critically important, Har HaBayit? And why is the bottom line is, why is the Beit HaMikdash of such great importance? And I was thinking about today, really for the first time, honestly, that we are told not to forget, right? We're told about the Beit HaMikdash, we're told about other things. We shouldn't forget it, right? It says you have to remember, this is Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim. If I forget Yerushalayim, then let my right hand lose its cunning. But to remember, to forget something means you had to know it. You had to be aware of it. If I say to you, by the way, do you all remember when we got together at the restaurant last week on Tuesday? Well, you don't, because it never happened. So if I'm telling you, if I forget Yerushalayim, may my right hand forget its cunning. What do you mean if I forgot it? I didn't know it. So again, that goes back to the idea that Yerushalayim is a living, breathing organism, as it were, to us. It's part of our Jewish DNA. The question still is, why is it that we feel a world without a Beit HaMikdash is, in a sense, alienated and desolate? But wait, let's be honest with ourselves. Look around Yerushalayim and put aside all the traffic, Baruch Hashem. I say Baruch Hashem because it means there's a lot of people there, and all the construction, Baruch Hashem, and all the honking and everything else. Look around Yerushalayim today. What do you see? Beauty, expansive areas, population, traffic, Torah scholars, yeshivot, schools, mothers and daughters and sons and fathers and brothers and sisters, teeming with people. There's probably more Kedusha going on and Torah learning going on in Yerushalayim today than ever in history, probably more than since the day the Torah was given to us on Har Sinai. So, like the Greek painter said, get over it. What is it we're mourning? I think the possible answer to that can be found in our daily tefillah, in our prayers. For a couple of thousand years in our davening, we've been talking and saying the bracha of Bonei Yerushalayim. Now, if you look in the Shemona Esrei, I did, when I first came to Israel, I did something that I did back in Chicago, which was to give a class in tefillah for a number of years. And it took me over a year just to teach Shemona Esrei, both here and back in the States. You don't, obviously the things that are taught in a class, you can't think about everything when you're actually davening because you'll never finish one tefillah. But over the course of time, and one of the things that was very much pronounced with the bolet in Shemona Esrei is that the brachot are in present tense, right? It's all in the present tense. And some of them don't necessarily seem to make sense to be said in present tense. For example, Hashem is mechayim etim. He revives the dead. So there's reasons for that. But it doesn't say, Baruch Ata Hashem yivneh Yerushalayim, or ha-boneh, the one who will build Yerushalayim. It says, boneh Yerushalayim, Baruch Ata Hashem, boneh Yerushalayim, the builder of Jerusalem. So on the one hand, you could just say, this is because Hashem is the one who built Jerusalem, right? He's the one who's called it. It's the Makom HaShe'ivchar, it's the place Hashem chose, which is why it gave it Kedusha. That's why the Beit HaMikdash has to be there. But we still say, boneh Yerushalayim. We say Chonen Hadad, the one who gives freely for us to have knowledge. That makes sense. But why boneh Yerushalayim? The Gemara tells us in Yerushalmi, Kol dor she'eno nivneh b'yamav, any generation in which the Beit HaMikdash is not rebuilt, ma'alin alav ki'ilu hu hecharev. We look at it as regarding as if the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed in that generation. Which means that every generation, put politics aside. It's not easy for me to say, but put politics aside. The fact that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash or do have a Beit HaMikdash is not up to God. It's up to us. It's in our hands. Bonei Yerushalayim means that God is the builder of Jerusalem through us, that we take action. Hashem, we're Hashem's, so to speak, messengers. We do the right thing. What is the right thing that we have to do? We'll see. In order to have the Yerushalayim of what used to be to come back, i.e. the Beit HaMikdash. And Aliyah L'Regel, going up to Temple Mount with whether it's going to be with Korbanot or not is a different story. But when we mourn the Beit HaMikdash, when we mourn the fact that we haven't had this building for 2,000 years, what is it exactly we're doing? We are, when I go into Yerushalayim, I go in usually by bus. And as they come around the curve from Alei Adumim, and you see the area of the old city, unfortunately, the first thing that draws your attention, the eye, is the gold dome that's there. That's where the Beit HaMikdash stood and will stand, hopefully already tomorrow. Later in the day, I'm busy in the morning. But hopefully it'll be there very shortly. But but when we see that, that means that we haven't done our job. So on the one hand, when we mourn the Beit HaMikdash, it's not just mourning the building that's not there for 2,000 years. We're mourning the fact that we who are obligated to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash by our actions and our deeds and changing who we are and how we act, we're not doing our job. And it will be rebuilt, Bezrat Hashem, when a sufficient number of Jews make the proper commitment to change their lives and to actually live Torah-based life and do the right thing in this world. We refer to Yerushalayim as the beating heart of the Jewish people. I'll tell you a beautiful thought I heard. I was on a little bit of a tiyul in Yerushalayim a few years ago with a bar mitzvah trip. I was already living here, and I honestly don't even remember which family it was, but I heard an amazing idea from this tour guide. He said, imagine you are flying a drone over Har Habayit, over the Temple Mount, and it is the time of the Beit HaMikdash, and you can record everything that's happened. And we know that there was a mitzvah to come 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, to Har Habayit, to Temple Mount. It was called mitzvat re'iyah, that you had to come and see and be seen on Temple Mount. Hundreds of thousands of Jews ascended the mountain and went back home after the Chag. So now you imagine your drone is videoing what's going on, and you see thousands and thousands of people coming to Temple Mount and thousands of people leaving. And then you see thousands and thousands of people coming to the Temple Mount and thousands of thousands leaving. What does it look like? It looks like a pumping heart. The blood comes in, the blood goes out, the blood comes in, the blood comes out. And we really can see this visually in our minds of Yerushalayim and Har Habayit being the beating heart of the Jewish life. And we mourn, not only because we haven't ostensibly done our job properly, and therefore there is no Beit HaMikdash, but because our heart still lies in ruins. For those of you who have had the opportunity to be on Har Habayit, or just to see it from a distance, and you see, not just hear about it in the news, but you see when the Arab children are playing soccer up there and making picnics up there, and it's the holiest place on the planet Earth, it tears your heart out. I had the opportunity, the first time I went up, I didn't go in the plaza. I went into, there's a shul that's up there, Rav Goren Zatzal, named after him, a shul there. That's right by Magav, right by the Mishmar Gvul place that's up on top, right next to the Kotel. And I went to mikvah and went in barefoot. It's a small area, but it's on Har Habayit. And it was on a Friday afternoon. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I went up there. I was one of only a couple of people in the room. I really didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to feel. And when I looked out and I saw Har Habayit as close as I've never been before in my life, and I saw exactly what I just described, these kids playing soccer and everything, I sat down on the ground, I took out a Tanakh, and I read the first parak of Eicha, because that's how I felt. I felt broken. that here we have people who are playing soccer in the holiest place, when instead it should be Jews standing there. It should be Nisuchamayim and Sukkot. It should be Korbanot. It should be bringing the Ketoret. It should be Kohen Gadol. Because when we think about it, we didn't just lose the Beit HaMikdash. We've lost millions of actions that are supposed to have taken place in the Beit HaMikdash. For those of you who go to shul and you see every day, or whenever you go to shul and you see Birkat Kohanim taking place in the morning, imagine the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol doing this and saying the Shem Hashem. It's unbelievable what we're missing, what we've lost out on for so many thousands of years right now. But why do we need it? Why do we need it now? I mean, again, just like we look around Yerushalayim, it's a thriving, living, growing, breathing city, and a city of beauty and splendor. Our lives are pretty rich. Our lives are physically good. Our lives are spiritually good, and hopefully content. Hopefully we're happy. So therefore, it would seem that something that happened a couple thousand years ago shouldn't impact us as greatly. Every one of us, all of you and myself included, had great grandparents. Somewhere, let's go back 5, 7 generations, 10 generations. No one of us knew any of those people. Do we sit here and we're here because of them? Without them, there's no you or me. But do we sit here and mourn them every day? Maybe on the yard side, if we have to go a few generations back. I'm not talking about a parent, not talking about a grandparent, not about a great-grandparent. I'm talking about 7, 8 generations back. We don't sit there. So what is it? What's going on here? We're challenged. We're being challenged every single day to improve this world, to raise the world to level of perfection, to change ourselves, to improve ourselves, and to say that I want to be the best person possible, as close to doing Ratzon Hashem, to doing the will of Hashem, because by doing the will of Hashem, it makes Hashem, as it were, we're talking human terms now, want to do what we want. What does that mean? We says in Pirkei Avot, Aseh Ritzono Ritzoncha, make his will your will, and by doing that, Hashem makes your will his will. What does that mean? It's a nice phrase. What does it mean? Hashem wants us to do Torah mitzvot. Hashem wants a relationship with every single human being, and especially with every single Jew. It's a different type of relationship. It's a parent-child relationship. It's a close relationship. And the relationship is always, I'm here for you. Always, I'm here for you. No matter what, you're still my child. And when we embrace that and we take the opportunity to do it, so no, to do the will of Hashem, the Ratzon Hashem, Hashem says, look what my children are doing. For those of you who have had the opportunity to be, before Corona especially, to be at the Kotel for Birkat Kohanim, or any other event where there are literally 100,000 Jews in the Kotel Plaza, streaming all the way back into the stairs, into the buildings, you have to think that Hashem looks down and says, these are my children, I'm having such nachas in them. We want to give Hashem that nachas. We want to give him that joy and that feeling of, wow, by each one of us doing what we're supposed to do. Now, does that mean all that, because you're going to hear my words all of a sudden tomorrow, everyone's going to be a tzaddik yisod olam, and everyone's going to be a lamed vavnik, and everyone's going to be perfection? Of course not. That's foolish. But it does mean that we have to understand that we have an individual and a collective responsibility. Our individual and our collective responsibility is to do what Hashem wants us to do to the best of our abilities, given any constraints we might have. By doing that, as a parent, when your child would come home, or your grandchild comes home, and they have a little scribble from Gan, and they say, this is supposed to be mommy and daddy and the sun, and this is the grass, and all those scribbles. This is beautiful, it's wonderful. What do? They put it on the fridge and said, this is fantastic. I once wrote a story and read it. I told a story once called God's Refrigerator. But I feel that every time we do something, even if we don't do the best job, it's a scribble of what we did with that mitzvah, that he put that mitzvah on his refrigerator. It says to his malachim, look at my children, look what they're doing. They're trying their best. They're making me happy. I'm so pleased. Does it mean he says, oh, yeah, can you imagine a parent, chas v'shalom, taking the scribble from this child from God and saying, ich, what is this? It's just scribble. Or is it called kish kush balabush? It's nothing. What would that do to the child? Hashem is our God, but Hashem is Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu is first. He's our father. And he's our parent. He wants us to do the right thing as best as we can. And that's our challenge here, because in our ways, in our lives, the Beit HaMikdash not being here makes it more difficult to live up to that challenge. Why? Why is it more difficult to live up to the challenge to be a good Jew and to be a believing Jew and to be a Jew that does Torah and mitzvot properly? Why is it that the lack of Beit HaMikdash makes it hard? When a person would go to the Beit HaMikdash, it was absolutely, obviously clear of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, being there. Whether it was the 10 miracles that took place, in the Beit HaMikdash is enumerated in Pirkei Avot. Any other things that happened in the Beit HaMikdash, all the non-miraculous things and the miraculous things, all gave the person a sense and a feeling of the closeness of God and the inspiration. I was this week in Hebron. I haven't been in Hebron for about 3 years, I think. And to stand in the shul in Hebron, meters away from Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel, and not Leah, but Rivka, and Sarah Imenu, and Adam, and Chava, maybe Esav's head, who knows? But all that, and to say the words in Shemona Esrei, Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, you could feel it. You absolutely, I felt that Shemona Esrei better this week, that mincha, than in a very long time in my davening. Why? Because there was something there. There was the power there. My very good friend, Barnea Selavan, has mentioned many times when he teaches and he guides, concept of the power of the place. What does that mean? I can sit in New York City and I can teach about David HaMelech being chased by Avshalom. And I can teach it in the classroom and, okay, I'm just teaching about these people, but you come and you are being chased better by Shaul HaMelech. And you can teach about that. Or you go down to Ein Gedi and you bring the Tanakh, you say, here's where David HaMelech may have hid, right there in one of those cracks. It's a different thing, it's the power of the place. We are missing that. We're missing the power of the presence of the Beit HaMikdash. Let me just show you something. This is, yes, it's just an artist rendition from the Machon HaMikdash, but this is what we are supposed to see. This is what we yearn to see. Imagine coming thousands and thousands of people and seeing the smoke from the Ketoret and seeing the Kohen Gadol and seeing these columns, Yachin and Boaz, if you don't know what that is, that's fine, and seeing the Kior and seeing these everything just gave the inspiration and the Shekhinah and the presence of God. And as our Galut continued and got stronger and longer, it became more difficult to inculcate ourselves with that feeling and to inculcate ourselves and make that feeling come alive to get closer to Hashem. Does it mean that without the Beit HaMikdash, we can't feel closeness to Hashem? Chas v'shalom. Of course we can. And we can grow and we can get closer, but we're still missing something very important. You know, many people think that to become very close to Hashem, it needs to go into the Kabbalah and to learn the works of the Arizal. But how do you get closer to Hashem? You make a kosher meal, you make brachot, you bench, you're careful to wash your hands, you learn Torah, you do mitzvot. That's what a Jew does. We keep Torah mitzvot as Hashem wants us to do them. Our table, when we eat, it's a mizbeach. For those of you who are in class with me and Tanya, we talked about this just a few weeks ago, what that whole concept means. But the average Jew, average believing religious Jew, still finds it very hard to believe that we can find the Shekhinah here in our material world. That feeling of alienation, that feeling of distance, is the inner meaning of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. What does that mean? The essence of our lives should be an effort to live in the presence with Hashem, to know Hashem is here with us, to be joyful with that, and to try to do our best in this world. But when we don't feel strongly Hashem's presence, The moment we feel that Hashem is displeased with us, then everything turns black, as it were. And then what happens is we are experiencing the effects of the Churban, the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. What we lament, what we cry about on Tisha B'Av, what we cry about and what we mourn during the course of the year when we break the glass at a chuppah, when we put the ashes on the head of the chatan, when we leave a piece unfinished in our home as Zecher Churban, what we are lamenting is not the absence of the building of the Beit HaMikdash itself, the actual building, but the Churban is the absence of Hashem's presence. The feeling of the closeness and proximity of Hashem to us in our lives. And as a result of that, if we understand that, we also understand that it's up to us, it's in our best interests and all of Am Yisrael's best interests to bring the day closer when the Beit HaMikdash will be built. You know, in a few days, unfortunately, if things don't change, we're going to read Eicha. Eicha, Aleph, Yud, Kaf, He means alas, or how. Eicha Yashva Badat. How is it the city of glory is sitting in Bidud, as it were? But that same series of letters makes up the word Ayeka. Same spelling, same everything. Ayeka means where are you? When we mourn for the Beit HaMikdash, the question that we are being asked when we say Eicha Yashva Badat is Ayeka, where are you? Where am I? Where do I fit in this puzzle? Where do you fit in this puzzle? What are we doing to see to it that the Beit HaMikdash is being rebuilt? Are we changing our inner selves? Are we growing? Are we getting better? Or are we just plodding along through life and just doing what we have to do to get by? And we'll ask the average religious person, do you really, truly, in your heart of heart, believe that Mashiach is going to come and there's going to be a Beit HaMikdash? I don't have an answer of what percentage, but I've actually had this discussion with many, many, many people, and you're going to get, unfortunately, a small percentage of people who truly believe it. They'll say they believe it, but when they're challenged, they'll say, look, do I believe it? Yes. Do I really think it's going to happen? No. And that's very sad, because our goal is not Mashiach, by the way. That's not our goal. Our goal is we do the things properly, the Mashiach comes, right? When you plug in your phone to charge the phone, your goal is not plugging in your phone. Your goal is you have a charged phone. Plugging in is the means. When we have Mashiach Bezrat Hashem, that's going to be the sign that we've done the right thing and we're going to build Beit HaMikdash and get rid of Amalek and everything else that goes with it. I wrote down, I photocopied something. I wish I remembered where I saw this. It was in a book, obviously, but let me just read this one paragraph to you. It's as if Hashem is saying to all of us today, you have come closer to accomplishing the ultimate goal than at any other time during the past 2,000 years. Never before have I brought you so close to that place that has drawn the Jewish heart for centuries. Yet so many Jews are so distant from this holy place that they do not care the Beit HaMikdash mountain finally belongs to them, and they have no concept of the precious Jewish way of life the Torah holds for them. What are you doing to help them discover the wonderful forgotten heritage that is rightfully theirs? Not all Jews live in Jerusalem, but Jerusalem lives in all of us. Our challenge is to expand the Jerusalem in us so that the Jerusalem and its rebuilt Beit HaMikdash will become the spiritual center for all the Jews and for all mankind. Yes, Yerushalayim is central to our lives. Yes, Beit HaMikdash is central to our lives. We have to understand now why. We see a little bit more of an insight, I hope, that Beit HaMikdash is not just we yearn for the building, that we yearn to see the Kohen Gadol, or we want to see the whole ceremony of Yom Kippur. We want to see all of that. But ultimately, what it is we want, it makes a better relationship. I like to compare the relationship between us and Hashem, the husband and wife. A husband and wife can say, I love you. Maybe once in a while they'll say, I love you. Maybe even once in a while buy each other a little present. But imagine the husband walks in, what's for supper? Or wife walks in, what's for supper? Why are the toys all over the place? What's going on here? There's no relationship. It's just they live together. If you ask them, they love each other. Yeah, we love each other. Of course, we're married. What else? What choice do I have? Of course, we love each other. And by the way, I'm not saying that flippantly. I've heard this, unfortunately, from couples over the years that I've met with. Is that love? How do you express love? Does it mean I say I love you? That's one thing. Does it mean I send you a text? That's something. How do I express it? Is it something that this woman or this man, my spouse, is on my mind? I'm thinking about him or her during the day. I send a little note. Surprise something. You always want to, I don't care how many years a person's married, whether they're in the Shana Rishona or they're married 65 years. There's always something to be done to improve that relationship. But if they don't communicate, they don't talk, and one spouse is always saying, I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and I want to be with you, and I want to spend my life with you, and the other one just go, okay. And there's no reciprocity. What's the relationship? But that's what happens with Hashem. Hashem says, we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right? You're supposed to love Hashem, but Hashem says to you, I love you. Come on, let's do this together. This is a partnership. And that's where we come in. I wanted to spend the last few minutes on, and you'll see the tie-in in a minute, on a book that I wrote recently, I published recently. I actually wrote it over the course of many years. One of the things that I tried to get across is imagery. You know, a lot of people have difficulty understanding concepts, Jewish or non-Jewish, without some way of picturing it in their minds. Someone once told me that it's almost impossible to explain to somebody who's never seen a spiral staircase without using your hand, because most people go like this, right? You need some hamchasha, you need some imagery, something to explain. So for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Chicago, and starting at about the age of 10, I was the Rav of a shul. I was a member of a shul called Congregation Kill of Jacob Beth Samuel, Chicago, KJBS. And many, many, many years later, I ended up becoming the rabbi of the shul. I think that's kind of a rarity to become the rabbi of the shul you grew up in. I had my bar mitzvah there, my ofruf, was there for good occasions, for bad occasions, and everything in between. And the last 10 years before we made Aliyah 13 years ago. And the 10 years prior to that, I was the rabbi of the shul. And the first year I became rabbi in June of 1999. So in I guess September of 1999, when the Chagim were coming. So I had in my head, oh, I guess first time the rabbi of a shul, I have to these speeches and all. And I thought that probably the hardest one to prepare would be the night of Yom Kippur, because everyone has in mind one thing. It's not tshuva. When they first come into shul, unfortunately, it's not. It's, oh my God, I got 25 hours of no eating and drinking. And some are going, and there's no devices. So I had to do something. I had to think of something to be a little different. And I came with this idea of talking about 3 images or 3 things I had seen personally or I was aware of during the course of the year that had some power to the image and also the lesson that could be learned from it. And I talked about 3 things, and afterwards people really seemed to have liked it. So I figured, it's a recipe that worked. I'll try it again the next year. They liked it again. So for many years in a row, 10 years in a row, that was what I did on the night of Yom Kippur. I spoke about 3 different images that I had seen, I was either involved in myself or I was aware of, and the life lesson that could be gained from it, especially for the time period of Elul and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the holiday season, because it's about introspection. And as a result of those 10 years of 3 stories each, every year I came up with this book called The 3 Images. And actually, make it a little cuter here. Inkvar, I made a little slide I have to show it to you. Let me move you over. Okay, this is actually a picture at Pomerantz bookstore. Right now, the book is there. What I'd like to do, I have a few minutes still. I would like to read one of the short. They're almost all short stories. This one has to be a total with the image and the lessons 2 pages. So the most I think is 3 pages, because for 2 reasons they're short. Every year there's 3 of them, so I couldn't be a long story for each one. And the average attention span of a person is a half-life of a tsetse fly. So the shorter the story, the stronger the image, hopefully the better the hook. So I'm going to read you the story, and it is about a pair of tefillin. The final image is a pair of tefillin. I say final because in each chapter there's 3. I say this is the first, second, and third. The final image is, let me take this off the screen share, sorry. I find it very distracting when I'm on Zoom and I just like a little bit of something. The final image is a pair of tefillin. There were times when I would wake up so early on Sunday, or I would have to leave town, that I was forced to daven shacharit elsewhere and not in the shul where I was the rabbi. It so happened that on one hot Sunday, I woke up very early and did not want to wait until 7:30 a.m. to daven in my shul, so I ended up going to another shul. When we reached Yishtabach, part of the prayer service in the morning, a man walked in who, by all appearances, had not spent any time learning in a kollel. I found it hard to believe that he was even Jewish, and here he was carrying a tefillin bag and a pointy kippah in his hand. As I continued to daven, I kept one eye on my siddur and the other on this man. As I looked at him, I began to sense that he was going through a major change in his life. I was not sure what made me think this. I don't mean a major change like becoming a Baal Tshuva. I mean a major change that was turning his life upside down. I'm not minimizing any actions of Baalei Tshuva. I am merely suggesting that this situation I was witnessing was unique. After a few minutes of watching him struggle to put on his tefillin, it finally dawned on me why I had such a feeling. As he slipped his shel yad, the straps that are wound around one's arm, over his arm, and began to tighten the knot, he made two additional motions that most people do not make when putting on tefillin. He first squeezed his left hand into a very tight fist. Then he took the tefillin strap, and before winding it around his arm, he held the strap between his teeth to tighten the knot. This man was using a similar set of actions that an addict uses when injecting drugs into his system, tightening the fist and holding the strap for making a tourniquet to inject drugs. This man, who in all likelihood was a recovering drug addict, was sitting in shul and putting on tefillin. By the way, he was, I checked afterwards. Not only that, he was making the exact same physical movements used to take drugs, the fist and the teeth, and was turning it around 180 degrees to put on tefillin. This is an image I will never forget. What a lesson it taught me and can teach you as well. We do things that we should not do. We all do things that make us feel embarrassed at the very least and ashamed at the worst. Yet we have the capacity and the ability, like this man, to change all of that. We can take one action and replace it with the opposite as a cure for the sin we might be doing. We often hear the expression to turn your life around. What exactly does that entail? For some, it might mean a more solid commitment to religion, to one's spouse, or to changing a host of other character traits. It can be taken almost literally as well. We can take an action that was used for an improper reason and turn it around like the man in the story and use it for the proper reason. Examples are numerous. Instead of speaking lashon hara, gossip, use that same capacity to daven better. Instead of using your mind to cheat another person, use the intellect to help someone improve his business. On Yom Kippur, it is time to face your demons. On Yom Kippur, it is time to face up to your transgressions and not only think about them, but to decide to take action as well. This book, as I said, is available through Pomerantz Bookstore. But if you'll allow me just to put on the screen for one moment, one more thing. Anyone who would be interested in purchasing one, it's 50 shekel. You can send me a message at my email address, ravzev@gmail.com, at my phone number, which is on the screen. And if for some reason you don't write it down, you think about another time, feel free, you can message Elena. She has my information, or anybody else in this group, and get me the information. I'll be happy to either drop a copy off by you, mail it to you. It's my pleasure. If you want it signed, I'm happy to do that as well. And there are hopefully a couple of events coming up that I'll be showing the book at, speaking at. I'll publicize that when it's the time. But if anyone's interested already, this is truly, I personally think, hearing the feedback from those who've already bought it has been, they found many of the stories inspirational, and hopefully have committed to do some change as a result of some of these stories. That's my hope. I didn't write the book. Honest to God, if I could just give it away, I'd give them all away. The purpose is not for me to make money on this. The purpose for me is to hopefully affect another person's life, even one, two. That'd be really nice. And I feel that I've done my part. So I want to thank Elena. I want to thank AACI. I want to thank everybody who's here tonight listening. And think about it as we get closer to Tisha B'Av, what your part can be in the big picture. You know, people can say, I'm just one person. What can I do? Well, one person makes a huge difference. I'll prove it to you in a negative way. Unfortunately, in other than Israel, almost every country in the world, when you go through the security at the airport, what do you have to do? You have to take off your shoes. There's a one guy. Now, millions of people have to take off their shoes every day when they're traveling. There's a one guy who's going to be the shoe bomber. But on the opposite and something positive, every single act you do helps Am Yisrael as a whole. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll be dancing together on the 10th of this year in the Beit HaMikdash. That's the goal.
Zev, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining. This was inspiring as always, very meaningful. Really appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Have a
Have a
great
good
evening,
night.
everyone. Be well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Done. He's out too.